Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. No president should fear public scrutiny of his program, for from that scrutiny comes understanding, and from that understanding comes support or opposition, and both are necessary. I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people. For I have complete confidence.
Klaus has done a fantastic job.
In the response and dedication of our citizens whenever they are fully informed. I not only could not stifle controversy among your readers, I welcome it. This administration intends to be candid about its errors. For as a wise man once said, an error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. We intend to accept full responsibility for our errors, and we expect you to point them out when we miss them. Without debate, without criticism, no administration and no country can succeed, and no republic can survive. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. And that is why our press was protected by the First Amendment, the only business in America specifically protected by the Constitution, not primarily to amuse and entertain, not to emphasize the trivial and the sentimental, not to simply give the public what it wants, but to inform, to arouse, to reflect, to state our dangers and our opportunities, to indicate our crises and our choices, to lead, mold, educate, and sometimes even anger public opinion. This means greater coverage and analysis of international news, for it is no longer far away and foreign, but close at hand and local. It means greater attention to improved understanding of the news, as well as improved transmission. And it means, finally, that government at all levels must meet its obligation to provide you with the fullest possible information outside the narrowest limits of national security. And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
Our story takes place in the legendary city of Troy, a prosperous city-state located on the coast of Asia Minor. For years, the Greeks and Trojans engaged in brutal war known as the Trojan War, over matters of honor, love, and power.
I have two wishes. If you grant them, no more of your people need die. First, you must give Helen back to my brother. Second, Troy must submit to my command to fight for me whenever I call.
You want me to look upon your army and tremble? Well, I see them. I see 50,000 men brought here to fight for one man's greed.
Careful, boy. My mercy has limits.
And I've seen the limits of your mercy. And I tell you now, no son of Troy will ever submit to a foreign ruler.
After a decade of relentless fighting, the Greeks found themselves unable to breach the walls of Troy. The city seemed impenetrable, and a new approach was desperately needed. Now here's where the story takes an intriguing turn. The Greeks hatched a cunning plan that would exploit the Trojans' trust and change the course of the war. They crafted a massive wooden horse, the iconic Trojan horse. But this horse was no ordinary sculpture. It was hollow and large enough to conceal a group of elite Greek soldiers. The Greeks hid their finest warriors within the belly of the horse, waiting for the perfect moment to put their audacious scheme into action. Picture this: the Trojan horse. An offering of supposed surrender was presented. Believing that their foes had finally given up, the Trojans welcomed the wooden giant into their city with celebrations. Little did they know that this gift was the embodiment of Greek cunning and determination. As the night fell and the Trojans revealed in their victory, the Greek soldiers emerged from their concealed shelter, opening the gates of Troy to their waiting comrades. The Greeks, now within the walls of the city, wrought havoc and destruction. The Trojans, caught off guard and unprepared, faced devastating defeat. And so, the once mighty city of Troy fell, not by sheer force, but the brilliance of a deceptive strategy. You see, the Trojan horse works as a decoy, where something harmless is presented and assimilated when it actually poses a credible threat. If you let down your barriers to someone who appears nice and similar to yourself, it allows that person to attack and destroy you much more efficiently, as your defences are now down. The Trojans lost the Trojan War because they were tricked by the Greeks. The Greeks built a large wooden horse and left it outside the gates of Troy. The Trojans thought it was a gift from the gods, so they brought it inside the city. That night, a group of Greek soldiers hid inside the horse and opened the gates of Troy to the rest of the Greek army. The Greeks sacked Troy and burned the city to the ground. It is true that the best nations were destroyed from within. The mightiest empires fell from internal corruption. Not like Trojan horse type invasion, but from an internal enemy from within its city in a position of power. Watch for the homegrown enemies. They are the ones that destroy a great nation more effectively than any foreign agent could ever do. The enemy has infiltrated Ireland's walls a long time ago. It's corrupted its people. The facade of democracy or socialism is the Trojan horse. Well then, Marxism and communism is the enemy within.
No society can be stable unless there is a basic, unthinking, unquestioning allegiance to certain common principles. You cannot possibly conduct a society, have agreement, unless that basic homogeneity and consensus exists. The political mechanism does least harm to the stability of a society in those societies that are most homogeneous and that have the closest approach to common values.
I'd like to share with you my plan to destroy Ireland. Number one, I'd make it a bilingual, bicultural country. History shows us that no bilingual, bicultural country lives at peace with itself. There's not one, I believe, that doesn't exist. With an incredible amount of tension and conflict, if not civil war. My second part of my plan would be to invent something called multiculturalism. This would be in two parts. Number one, I would say that all cultures are created equal. I'd pretend to the masses that bringing in alien ideologies and cultures into a host nation would make no difference. This makes it impossible now for the indigenous peoples to talk about such things as protecting their own heritage and culture. The second part of this cunning plan is that I would really try very hard to promote the people who migrate to a said country to continue their cultural identity within the host nation.
All of you, our precious Muslim community, must be part of shaping that road and that destination. I believe our future is bright.
Assalamu alaikum. I have to say, I haven't been at Croke Park for quite some time, but what a joyous occasion. I cannot imagine a more fitting occasion to make a return here.
Islam requires its followers to show respect and tolerance, even to those who do not share their faith. The Prophet Muhammad said, God has no mercy on one who shows no mercy to others.
Sinn Féin stand with the Palestinian people, just as we have stood with those from every corner of the world, of every race and of every creed, who loudly and proudly declare in our thousands, in our millions, we are all Palestinians. In our thousands, in our millions, we are all Palestinians. In our thousands, in our millions, we are all Palestinians.
Promoting the so-called minority classes' culture and diminishing or ridiculing the host nations. My third part of the plan would be to make the fastest growing demographic group in that country the least educated. I would add a second underclass to the first underclass, unassimilated, undereducated antagonists. Then I'd have 50% of them drop out of schools, not graduate from secondary school. The fourth part of my plan would be to get the big corporations and big businesses to fund these efforts with lots of money. I would invest in ethnic identity and victimology. I would get them to think about their lack of success was only the fault of the majority. The fifth part of my plan is I would develop dual citizenship. I would promise people actually divided loyalties.
Freedom of expression is one of the cornerstones of democracy. The right to give voice to our thoughts, to publish them, even to offend others without fear of censure. Ireland's incitement to hatred and hate offences bill has attracted criticism for the impact it could have on free speech. Will this proposed legislation protect vulnerable minorities as intended, or will it see people criminalised for speaking their mind? A new bill updating Ireland's laws on hate crime and hate speech has been approved by government and is currently making its way through the Seanad. Existing legislation dating back to 1989 is now seen as insufficient in the age of social media. New provisions will make it an offence to make speech intended to be threatening or abusive or likely to provoke hatred. Those affected communities are specifically referenced in the legislation as groups with protected characteristics. These include race, skin colour, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, disability, gender and gender identity.
The sixth part, and this is important, I would place all of these subjects off limits to debate or for discussion. I would make it a taboo to talk about these subjects or actually criticise anything. I would make it come up with a word like heretic used to be 200 years ago. Let's say we call it racist, and I would try to accuse anybody of this that would object to any of my ideas. Part 7. I then would make it impossible to enforce our immigration laws. I would develop a mantra. Let's call this, sure hasn't the Irish travelled all over the world? As if this mantra somehow meant that the Irish indigenous people of today, whose ancestors fought and died for this nation, who fought off famines, wars and poverty, must now accept a mass plantation of modern-day Ireland. Yes, the best way to destroy a nation is from within. You subvert their strengths by getting them to fight amongst themselves. You don't even need to do anything physical to defeat them. Demoralisation and civil unrest are more powerful tools than people give them credit. If you can convince people their country is evil, they will not even lift a finger to save it. In fact, they will feel morally obligated to bring about its own destruction. Therefore, anyone who doesn't believe it is, by default, is immoral. Those that resist it are automatically evil. The moment you decide someone or something is evil is the moment reconciliation becomes impossible. Everything I mentioned sounds a lot like Antifa and Black Lives Matter, doesn't it? Well, Black Lives Matter, the organisation, not the slogan or idea. It's not nationalism that's destroying Ireland. It's not fascists screaming down opposition voices for just saying all lives matter. Fight back! Stand up, fight back! Stand up, fight back! But I digress. You see, the best way to destroy a country is to get it to destroy itself. Then when they are too weak to defend themselves, you invade them. This minimises the risk to the invaders while maximising the damage to the invaded. You see, throughout history, governments have ruled and dictated to its peoples, whether it was ancient Rome, Mao's China, or Soviet Russia. Emperors and tyrants have ruled by either force or psychological warfare, using either coercive measures or the use of propaganda, or even both. Ancient Rome found an excellent way of keeping the people happy under tyranny. The emperor or tyrants gave its people scraps of food such as wheat for compliance, as a sort of social welfare payment.
Shut and no weddings celebrated. Public festivals shall be at the 5th hour in the circus. Wine to be provided by the Capitoline Fraternity and cakes by the Guild of Millers. The Guild of Millers uses only the finest grains, true Roman bread for true Romans.
They also created entertainment to keep the people distracted, such as the gladiator arenas. Today we have football, Netflix and other entertainment services. This is where we can get the term bread and circuses. Keep the people docile, happy enough so that they do not rebel, whilst the government take more and more of your freedoms away from you. But for those who love their nation and race, the bread is stale, the circuses are dull, and we have become painfully aware that the enemy is already well within inside our gates. It is now time we had a national vanguard that protects the people of Ireland. The only person who has taken the time to create this vanguard has been Justin Barrett with Clan Éireann. Will you be part of this new vanguard? Will you be part of the rebellion against the Reds' revolution? The attack on nationalism is happening from both establishment and unfortunately many establishment shills that pretend to be on the side of nationalism but are truly wolves in sheep's clothing. Many so-called nationalists chiming in with the establishment's attack on Clan Éireann tells me that the establishment is truly worried about a strong organised nationalist movement being organised, one that puts God, nation and its people first. Make no mistake, this is a movement that has to happen. For far too long, the Irish people have been lone wolves, with no organising, no plans or no goals. Most of us were never activists pre-2020, and this war, orchestrated by the international community on our nation, has destroyed us. Simply put, we were a group of strangers brought together because of our love for our beautiful country and the freedoms that come with her. But without guidance or a plan on where to go next, we are lost. Ireland needs strong leaders with strong minds throughout our nation that come together and plan a course to the direction that this nation is steered. For me and many like me, only a nationalist idea will work for the best interests of Ireland and its people. But a new idea has to come to the forefront, a uniform security group that's main focus is simply defending one another from the enemies embedded into our nation. A uniformed security group that's only there as a defence. The Irish people understand that currently An Garda Síochána is under the control of a foreign entity, and its orders as of today is to attack its own people who try to stop this invasion of Éire. First they ignore you, then they ridicule you, then they fight you, and then you win. But ridicule is man's most potent weapon. Those who ridicule the nationalist movement, those of us who show strength in their faith of God, country and his people, and more so, those who show conviction to try better their own nation, are the very same people that promotes and amplifies the message of weakness from the Marxist left, and worse, encourages their insanity and sexual desires and deviances. Don't give up. Don't give in to the face of patronising ridicule, amused disdain, or being ignored. Keep fighting for God, nation and family, and also for the very freedoms that our ancestors fought to ensure we had when we were born. We have a duty to do the same for Ireland's future sons and daughters. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. Freedom must be fought for, protected, and handed on for our next generation, and give them the tools to do the same. But if we do not fight now, one day, very soon, we will be telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in Ireland, where men and women were truly free. What Ireland needs is strong guidance, a structure, and of course, a professional, uniformed, organised group with a clear outlook of how Ireland should be shaped going into the future, that best represents the Irish people and the Irish nation, regardless of your personal opinions about whether that's Clan Éireann or someone else. Whether you are a civic nationalist or ethno-nationalist, libertarian, or even an old school socialist, or any other label the establishment wants to put on it. But if you simply want an Ireland that's not run by globalist corporations, we must all put our differences aside and come together right now. For me, ethno-nationalism, in which I firmly believe is the only way to save this country and its indigenous peoples from going out of existence. Simply, ethno-nationalism, for me, is the belief in protecting the nation's indigenous race. But first and foremost, people need to understand Ireland is at war. Whilst I firmly believe the need in having an Irish-led nationalist government going forward, to which I will give my full support to any and all nationalist political parties that I believe serves in the best interests of the Irish people. I will not openly attack any of these parties, but I will always criticise policies that I feel need to be queried. Constructive criticism is essential in a healthy society, but those who openly attack national grassroots movements and national political parties dilutes the idea of nationalism itself. Unfortunately, people are fooling themselves if they believe that we can simply vote ourselves out of this war. I use the term ethnocide a lot in regards to the current United Nations mass invasion of third world immigrants into Ireland. What exactly is ethnocide? It is the deliberate and systematic destruction of the culture of an ethnic group. Ethnocide is being carried out against the Irish indigenous people by the destruction of our way of life and the promotion of foreign cultures through multiculturalism and dominant ideologies such as Islam. The push of alien ideologies, aka multiculturalism, which is the forced mass invasion of other ethnic groups into community, aka ethnic diversity, is the suicide of all nations and its people. This ethnocide is orchestrated by the likes of the United Nations and the European Union, and financed and promoted by the likes of George Soros, Open Society. Also, all Irish NGOs and all Irish national and local businesses and community groups and trade unions that are pushing the 17 sustainable development goals of Agenda 21, and more so, complying to the globalist ESG. This is simply the control mechanism. All businesses are complying with the World Economic Forum stakeholder capitalism. ESG stands for environmental, social and governance. In shorthand, for an investing principle that prioritises environmental issues, social issues and corporate governance.
Some Irish nationalists believe that this war can be stopped by peacefully protesting, whilst watching the same peaceful protesters being pepper sprayed and attacked by state mercenaries dressed as An Garda Síochána.
Others believe that TikTok videos and social media pressure can stop this. I can assure you that anyone who believes either of these approaches can stop what's happening, and what's worse, what's coming, is delusional. Some believe that a mass awakening will happen and that we should stay focused on getting these people to stand with us and give them the courage and motivation to fight for their country. Unfortunately, what many people believe we must do in order to get them on our side
is the belief we must restrict what we now say or do, even if what we are saying is the full truth, in order to appeal to these people.
The truth is, we cannot make anyone stand and fight for their country. We can only show them why we stand and fight. The majority of the country right now are demoralised and complying. They will continue with the rhetoric that I'll fight if and when it comes to my door.
First, they came for the anti-maskers, but I did not speak out because I was not an anti-masker. Then they came for the anti-vaxxers, and I did not speak out because I was not an anti-vaxxer. Then they came for the nationalists, and I did not speak out because I was not a nationalist.
Then they came for the Christians, and I didn't speak out because I was not a Christian. Then they came for me, but by then there was no one left to fight for me. This is the dark truth. If all nationalists, both ethnic or civic, if all libertarians and basically every single person that loves their country, if they cannot put their differences aside right now, I can assure you Ireland will be lost and gone forever. We need to put all our egos and beliefs to one side. Stop focusing on and attacking what others do, and start focusing on what you can do. Get behind every patriot who's trying something different, trying their best to shape a better Ireland. We are almost 5 years into the United Nations Agenda 21 war on our country, and most people don't even know that there is a war. Many understand that our country is being destroyed, but as long as it doesn't directly affect them, they will never lift a finger. This sadly will remain the case. I can assure you. Only a few thousand brave men fought the British establishment over 100 years ago, yet hundreds of thousands mourn their deaths. The majority of society have become weak, docile, strong enough for a day's work, just enough to pay their bills and enjoy going home to watch the football or Netflix and have a few beers, enjoying all the wonderful bread and circuses as their nation and families' freedoms are stripped apart, piece by piece. You see, Marxist Reds have infiltrated all our institutions, whether it's education, religion, law and judiciary, media, all political parties, both traditional left and centre-right conservatives. Like a cancer, it has spread into our society through bought and paid for expert class, pushing bought and paid for reviewed studies, parroting the same propaganda on every news station and promoted by all the entertainment that we watch. Repeat a lie enough times, the lie becomes the truth. The greatest fairy tale ever created is the idea of democracy and how fair democracy truly is. Everyone gets a vote, Isn't it wonderful? The answer is absolutely not, and here is why. How can it be? When we have a nation of people who cannot define the difference between a male and a female, we now have a generation of people brainwashed with Marxist ideologies and self-indulgent morals. We often hear all Western leaders scream that there is a threat to our democracy. But in truth, democracy is a threat to every man, woman and child's freedom, and that of the Republic. In fact, the current state of democracy does not belong anywhere near a true republic. We're used to thinking very highly of democracy, and by extension, that of ancient Athens, the civilization that gave rise to it. But it's very strange that one of ancient Greece's greatest philosophers was highly suspicious of its other achievement, democracy. The founding father of Greek philosophy, Socrates, is portrayed in the Dialogues of Plato as usually pessimistic about the whole business of democracy. In Book 6 of the Republic, Plato describes Socrates falling into conversation with a character called Adeimantus and trying to get him to see the flaws of democracy by comparing society to a ship. If you were heading out on a journey by sea, asked Socrates, who would you ideally want deciding who's in charge of the vessel? Just anyone? Are people educated in the rules and demands of seafaring? The latter, of course, said Adeimantus. So why then, responds Socrates, do we keep thinking that any old person should be fit to judge who should be the ruler of a country? Socrates' point here is simply
that voting in an election is a skill, not a random intuition. And like any skill, it needs to be taught systematically to the people.
Letting the citizenry vote without an education is as irresponsible as putting an unqualified person in charge of sailing a ship. Socrates was unfortunate enough
to have first-hand experience of the foolishness of voters. The philosopher was put on trial on trumped-up charges of corrupting the youth of Athens.
A jury of 500 Athenians was invited to weigh up the case and decided by a narrow margin that the philosopher was guilty. So he was murdered by the very democracy he had warned about. Socrates was not an elitist, well, at least in the normal sense. He didn't believe that a narrow few should only vote. He did, however, insist that only those who had thought about issues rationally and deeply should be let near a vote. We have forgotten this distinction
between an intellectual democracy and a democracy by birthright. We have given the vote to all without connecting it to wisdom.
And Socrates knew exactly where that would lead, to a system the Greeks feared above all.
Demagoguery. Ancient Athens had painful experience of demagogues.
A demagogue is a political leader who seeks support by appealing to the desires and prejudices of ordinary people rather than by using rational argument. His example of democracy and how someone gets democratically elected was simple. He asks us to imagine an election debate between two candidates. One who's a doctor and the other who's a sweet shop owner. The sweet shop owner would say to the people about his rival, look at this person. He causes you discomfort. He gives you disgusting medicine and tells you not to eat and drink whatever you like. He'll never serve you treats and pleasant things like I do. If the doctor tells the person the truth, his answer will sound like, I cause you discomfort and go against your desires in order to help you. This would more than likely cause an uproar amongst the voters. Don't you think we have forgotten Socrates' warnings against democracy?
We have preferred to think of democracy as a non-ambiguous good rather than something that is only ever as effective as the education system that surrounds it.
We have allowed Marxist ideologies and Marxist dialect corrupt our young. We now rely on the votes of people who cannot differentiate
the difference between a man and a woman
to vote in the best interests of the nation. The demagogue dresses as a Democrat, using state propaganda indoctrination through public education, aka the Board of Education, to push whatever agenda the government wishes. This is clearly obvious by the sharp decline on children's actual intelligence and the sharp rise of serious mental health issues such as gender dysphoria and other insanities that's been encouraged. Public schools have done more harm than good. How could they not? The state has taken the care and upbringing of children out of the hands of parents where it belongs. The politicians, or demagogues, has thrown the child's full education into the hand of irresponsible and unintelligent quacks posing as pedagogues. One of the main tasks of every pedagogue is to critically think and evaluate their own work in order to push their opinions and teachings onto the child.
In this way, the child is now placed at the very centre of an indoctrination process, which is the aim of the public education.
Taking away the child's critical thinking and replacing it with the establishment's collective way of thinking. The true aim of all pedagogues is simply to force their victim into a mould, rather than helping those kids to awaken independent or logical thought.
Yeah, what about all the stabbings in Killarney? 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 I don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about? Stabbings in Killarney. Any of you want to talk about the stabbings in Killarney? Does anybody want to talk about the stabbings in Killarney? Does anybody talk about the stabbings in Killarney? I want to talk about the stabbings in Killarney. You want to talk about the stabbings in Killarney? You want to talk about the stabbings in Killarney? Nobody wants to talk about the stabbings in Killarney.
Nobody wants to talk about the stabbings in Killarney.
No, because it doesn't suit your narrative, does it? It doesn't suit your narrative.
John D. Rockefeller, who created the General Education Board, said this: "I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers." What does school really teach children? 1. Truth comes from authority. 2. Intelligence is the ability to remember and repeat. Repeat a lie enough times, the lie becomes the truth. 3. Accurate memory and repetition are rewarded. Adults continue these pointless exercises with reality TV game shows that expects people to parrot all the establishment's useless information. 4. Non-compliance is punished. 5. Conform. To conform intellectually and socially is rewarded. Critical thinking is not accepted throughout a tyrannical government. A nation of thinkers is more dangerous to government than a nation of slaves. Either a nation controls their government, or their government will control its people. Thus, those who dare question the prescribed narrative will be marked as troublemakers and/or conspiracy theorists.
Times, in a wide-ranging speech, he dealt with the legacy of Michael Collins, Ireland's role in the world, and in particular the threat to democracy.
We unite in defiance of those who try to silence elected politicians, who try to thwart the will of the people by violence, threat, or intimidation.
And he addressed the growth of the far right and said Ireland must stand together in defiance of the attempts to divide and distort.
There are some who wave a tricolour, our flag, our tricolour, and claim patriotism, while betraying every founding principle that this country stands for: freedom, equality and opportunity. It's up to each of us, and especially those of us in leadership positions, to be the solution we seek. So please, call it out. Use your voice, and don't just whisper it. Call out racism, call out hate, call out ugliness every time you see it.
Something is coming. Something hungry for blood. A shadow grows on the wall behind you, swallowing you in darkness. It is almost here. What is it?
What if it's the Demogorgon? Oh, Jesus, we're so screwed if it's the Demogorgon.
It's not the Demogorgon. An army of troglodytes charge into the chamber.
Troglodytes?
Told you. Wait a minute. Do you hear that? That sound. Boom. Boom. Boom! That didn't come from the troglodytes. No, that came from something else. The Demogorgon!
My name is Piers McHenry, and I'm a lecturer in geography in University College Cork. And in fact, my special subject is migration, and I've worked on this now since the 1980s.
We're in deep shit.
Demagogues use the pedagogues in the education system to mould the mind of its students to become activists and foot soldiers of the establishment. Irish students have been brainwashed to believe that nationalism, which is the love of God, nation and family, is bad, whilst believing the idea of internationalism, the idea of putting the global world's problem above every moral obligation to the nation, is good. The sort of thinking I usually refer this to as is international socialism or globalism, which is heading towards a feudalist style communist system, just like China. We have created a nation of people who will vote for the betterment of themselves instead of the betterment of a nation. A democracy of highly indoctrinated students will always elect the sweet shop owners who offers them the most goodies. This is the true face of the establishment's brainwashing. The idea of using government to better the needs of an individual rather than that of its nation.
After indoctrinating all the students to want another system, the stakeholders are propagating stakeholder capitalism as being better for people and planet.
This is the best time for leaders to come together, for the world to become more inclusive, more sustainable.
And how this strategy was successful in China to bringing about a communist state.
What's going on in our school and in our country is really a replay of the Cultural Revolution in China. The similarities are terrifying.
In 1943, the following directive was issued from party headquarters to all communists in the United States. It read, "When certain obstructionists become too irritating, label them after suitable build-ups as fascist or Nazi or anti-Semitic, and use the prestige of anti-fascist and tolerance organizations to discredit them. In the public mind, constantly associate those who oppose us with those names which already have a bad smell. The association will, after enough repetition, become fact in the public mind."
Who are Ireland's anti-fascist movement? Communists. Who are Ireland's anti-racist movement? Communists. Who are the socialist Republican movement? Communists. No, this doesn't mean one cannot oppose fascism or racism without being a communist. It does, however, create a belief system that you oppose a nationalist belief, which the communist will exploit. Your weakness and lack of respect of the nation strengthens the internationalist destruction of said nation.
The other side of this tragedy is how it will change Europe. Non-Western migrants had already been flooding into Europe for decades. Leaders refused to stop it.
My concern is doing away with whiteness. Whiteness is a form of racial oppression. There can be no white race without the phenomenon of white supremacy.
Irish nationalism is simply a nationalist political movement which asserts that the people of Ireland should govern Ireland as a sovereign state.
Alexandrovich Bezmenov. Mr. Bezmenov was born in 1939 in a suburb of Moscow. He was the son of a high-ranking Soviet Army officer. He was educated in the elite schools inside the Soviet Union and became an expert in Indian culture and Indian languages. He had an outstanding career with Novosti, which was the, and still is, I should say, the press arm or the press agency of the Soviet Union. It turns out that this is also a front for the KGB. He escaped to the West in 1970 after becoming totally disgusted with the Soviet system, and he did this at great risk to his life. He certainly is one of the world's outstanding experts on the subject of Soviet propaganda and disinformation and active measures. Well, you spoke several times before about ideological subversion. That is a phrase that I'm afraid some Americans don't fully understand. When the Soviets use the phrase ideological subversion, what do they mean by it?
Ideological subversion is the slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in four basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. For the last 25 years. Actually, it's overfulfilled because demoralization now reaches such areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov and all his experts would even dream of such a tremendous success. Most of it is done by Americans to Americans, thanks to lack of moral standards. As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom. When a military boot crashes his balls, then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation of demoralization. The next stage is destabilization. This time, subverter does not care about your ideas and the patterns of your consumption. Whether you eat junk food and get fat and flabby, doesn't matter anymore. This time, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation, what matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. And you can see it quite clearly that in some areas, in such sensitive areas as defense and economy.
Ireland, overseas development aid, we have to be the most generous country in the world, or the greatest shower of idiots that ever walked. Let me talk about Ethiopia receiving 552 million from this state in overseas development aid. Its military budget is 1.58 billion. It has a defence force of 503,000. It has 220 battle tanks, 345 personnel carriers, 97 military aircraft. It has no naval ships. Ireland defence force has fallen apart. We don't have military aircraft capable of defending the state. We have one ship defending our Atlantic and our Irish Sea. Our military force is depreciating at a rate of 50 net per month. Are we the greatest idiots that ever walked? Now that we're in election mode, I am asking the citizens of this country to demand that we put overseas development aid, a review of, and a review of NGO funding for this entire state. 2.137 billion euros in a year being given to countries that have far more than we have.
The influence of Marxist-Leninist ideas in the United States is absolutely fantastic. I could never believe it 14 years ago when I landed in this part of the world that the process will go that fast. The next stage, of course, is crisis. It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis. You can see it in Central America now. And after crisis, with a violent change of power, structure and economy, you have so-called the period of normalization. It may last indefinitely. Normalization is a cynical expression borrowed from Soviet propaganda. When the Soviet tanks moved into Czechoslovakia in '68, Comrade Brezhnev said, "Now the situation in brotherly Czechoslovakia is normalized."
There will be no return to the old normal for the foreseeable future. I repeat, there will be no return to the old normal for the foreseeable future.
So people assume we are just going back to the good old world which we had, and everything will be normal again in how we are used to normal, in the old fashion. This is, let's say, fiction. It will not happen.
This is what will happen in the United States if you allow all these schmucks to bring the country to crisis, to promise people all kind of goodies and the paradise on earth, to destabilize your economy, to eliminate the principle of free market competition, and to put a big brother government in Washington, D.C. with benevolent dictators like Walter Mondale, who will promise lots of things, never mind whether the promises are fulfillable or not. Your leftists in the United States, all these professors and all these beautiful civil rights defenders, they are instrumental in the process of the subversion only to destabilize the nation. When their job is completed, they are not needed anymore. They know too much. Some of them, when they get disillusioned, when they see that Marxist-Leninists come to power, obviously they get offended. They think that they will come to power. That will never happen, of course. They will be lined up against the wall and shot. But they may turn into the most bitter enemies of Marxist-Leninists when they come to power. And that's what happened in Nicaragua. You remember most of these former Marxist-Leninists were either put to prison or one of them split and now he's working against Sandinistas. It happened in Grenada when Maurice Bishop was already a Marxist. He was executed by a new Marxist who was more Marxist than this Marxist. It's the same pattern everywhere. The time bomb is ticking. With every second, the disaster is coming closer and closer. Unlike myself, you will have nowhere to defect to.
You see this wherever there is a divided community with a majority and a minority, for everyone immediately says, oh, well, this must be because the minority is being unjustly treated. In fact, in this country, the immigrant minority is not only not being unjustly treated, but they are being treated with a lavish concern, which no minority would enjoy in any other country in the world, so much so, as Mr. Holby said in his report, they can't think what's wrong with our heads, the way we carry on. But then people say, there wouldn't have been this violence if we weren't doing something wrong, so they immediately try to find out what it is that they were doing wrong to make up for it. The result of that is simply to put more power, more leverage in the hands of those who are operating the violence. And so it goes on until there is very natural, the technical term is a backlash. You have a backlash, and of course it would be called a white backlash. And so on one side and the other, you have what eventually erupts into a form of civil war. And we are, if we were asked to create the conditions for civil war, we couldn't do better than what we have been achieving and are continuing to accumulate in some of the major cities and industrial areas of this country.
For you to have been born required you to have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, 16 great-great-grandparents. In fact, if you go back only 10 generations, it took 4,096 ancestors for you to be here today. That's 4,096 people who struggled, survived, loved, fought, won, lost, cried and cheered. So you could be born. Your ancestors would have faced unbelievable adversity, famines, extreme poverty, nasty diseases that there was no cure for, and so much more. Yet here we are complaining about how hard it is at a time where in fact it has never been easier to be healthy, wealthy and thrive. No Irish person wants their children and their grandchildren to become a minority in the nation that their ancestors built. But unfortunately, the truth is that they are likely to become a despised and hated minority because of the way people are being indoctrinated now to think that whites are responsible for everything that's ever gone wrong for non-whites everywhere in the world at any time in history. In Japan, the Japanese have the right to maintain a Japanese majority. Likewise, in China, the Chinese have the right to maintain a Chinese majority. It's the same for practically every non-white country. But if the English wish to remain a majority, they're somehow hateful. Likewise, what is wrong with indigenous Irish who are only white, wanting their people of European stock to remain a majority in their own country? We never voted to be replaced. What is happening in the Republic of Ireland and all of Europe today is a peaceful invasion, a non-military invasion, which the Irish people have the power to stop the ethnocide of its people, but unfortunately they have been psychologically disabled and are unable to say no. This is a country that our ancestors built for us, and we wish you well, but all non-Irish peoples must flourish in their own countries. And these people would have been better off trying to improve their own conditions in their own ancestral nation. White Europeans are unable to say this over fears of labels such as racist, Nazi or far right. Marxist critical theory creates a class power swap. The so-called minority gets favoritism and allows the manufactured minority to rule over the so-called majority. The so-called evil majority, which is said to be the ethnic Irish, must now hand their so-called white privilege over to those less privileged. Irish government no longer does anything for its own Irish people, those who are struggling. There's no free college, no free food, no free housing, no free anything. No, all these things now become priorities for the so-called minority groups. This incentivizes victimhood. It rewards weakness. People who fled their own countries for whatever reason and attack strength for those who love their nation and wants to fight for it.
Several years ago, I went to see comedian Kamal Bell perform, and as a part of his act, he did something like a racial roll call to get the crowd warmed up. So he started out and he said, "Any black people in the house tonight?" There was claps and cheers. And he said, "If you're black in here tonight and you're proud, I want you to put your fist in the air and yell black power." And all the black people in attendance, with unison and with pride, they put their fists in the air and they yelled, "Black power!" And then he said, "What about Latinos? Any Latinos in the house?" And there was claps and cheers. And he said, "If you're Latino in here tonight and you're proud, put your fist in the air and yell, Latino power." Same thing. All the Latinos in unison with pride, they put their fist in the air and yelled, Latino power. And then Kamal said, "Any white people in the house tonight?" And there was a few claps, and he said, "If you're white in here tonight and you're proud, I want you to put your fist in the air and yell, white power." And there was silence.
Be with us as we offer up a prayer for the end of white supremacy.
I want people to come into our country in the largest numbers ever.
An unrelenting stream of immigration
non-stop. Non-stop.
We will come here, we have been coming here, and we will continue to come here in hundreds of millions until indeed Gaddafi said Europe will turn black.
The theory of the Great Replacement is about demographic change. It's about this idea that, I mean, they also use the language of white genocide, the language that that white populations are shrinking ethnically due to demographic change, and that through birth rate replacement, there will be a shrinking and ever shrinking population of whites.
Some more news: the results of the 2020 census just came out, and for the first time in American history, the number of white people went down.
As you see in some of these groups, especially the extreme right wing, there's this conspiracy theory about the Great Replacement conspiracy, essentially, which says that there's this great plot to replace white people with immigrants from other parts of the world.
You know, the Great Replacement theory, which says that white people are being systematically replaced by brown and black people who are, you know, allegedly, according to this false conspiracy theory, being brought in.
I think one of the challenges that governments and communities across the world have to face right now is understanding that even if that's true, we have to find ways to frame demographic change in other ways.
Folks like me who were Caucasian of European descent, for the first time in 2017, will be in an absolute minority in the United States of America.
Replacement conspiracy theory.
Absolute minority. Fewer than 50% of the people in America, from then and on, will be white European stock.
That Great Replacement conspiracy theory.
That's not a bad thing. That's a source of our strength.
Part of this greater America that we see on the horizon and that is arriving daily is just simply waiting for old white guys like me to die off, and we're going to have a new America.
And you're okay saying that?
Oh, absolutely.
With a smile?
Oh, yeah, sure.
They put forth conspiracy theories with respect to white genocide and the Great Replacement.
Europe is not going to be the monolithic societies that they once were in the last century. Jews are going to be at the center of that. It's a huge transformation for Europe to make. They are now going into a multicultural mode, and Jews will be resented because of our leading role.
It's a new Ireland.
It is, though. It is the new Ireland. It's the new Ireland of new, different diversities, multicultural people, Filipinos, Spanish, Africans, mixed people. I met a girl the other day, and I was like, "Where you from?" She goes, "My man's from China, and my dad is from Africa." I'm like, "Whoa, Ireland is unique now. We're mixed." Because I can imagine in 10 years' time, there's going to be Barack Obamas walking around, Beyonce's, and different sorts, mixture of people. So the whites are going extinct here now, so we're taking over.
The Frankfurt School Institute of Social Research has had a major impact on our Western way of life and how our societies and culture have drastically declined. The decline would appear as many as having begun in the 1960s, but it started much earlier than that. We have to go back to World War I to find the source of the problem that infests our society today. As World War I was upon us in 1914, leading communists believed that in the event of an outbreak of war, the workers would rise up and realise their true class consciousness and turn away from the respective countries favouring the communist revolution. This, as we all know, did not happen with any long-term success. Outside of Russia, the men of the respective nations embroiled in the war signed up in their millions to fight for their beloved countries. They paid the ultimate price in their millions. Not for communism, but for the love and loyalty to their nation. This was obviously a smack in the face to the communists. Their predictions had been proven to be wrong. The cold hard reality that they had to face was that the rhetoric and ideological revolution was not going to happen as they would have wished. Communism briefly had a grip on Hungary during 1918-1919 as the Bolshevik Bela Kun regime took power, and a communist uprising led by Rosa Luxemburg in Germany was beaten back by returning German soldiers from the front lines of World War I. A successful communist revolution did occur in Russia in 1917, and the result of that revolution had resulted in the slaughter of 30+ million people, including the Russian Tsar and his family, and was the beginning of decades mass murder by the most evil ideologies known to man. It was funded by Jewish bankers Jacob Schiff and Max Warburg. It was led by Vladimir Lenin, whose real name, Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, also of Jewish heritage, along with Jewish Red Army commander Leon Trotsky, whose real name was Bronstein. And those of you who are unsure of Leon Trotsky, he is the man who created the modern definition of the word racism, to silence all those who oppose the demographic changes of race within one's own nation. The revolution of 1917 came 12 years after another failed Jewish Marxist uprising in 1905, after what came to be known as Bloody Sunday. With the widespread failure of communist revolution throughout the rest of Europe, some Jewish communists sought to understand why it had failed to materialise. Why had the Europeans not embraced communism? Two Marxist theorists, Antonio Gramsci and George Lukács, settled upon one definitive reason: Western culture and Christianity were the reasons why the workers had to come to reject communism. Their true Marxist class interests had been blinded by the foundations of Western society. Indeed, in 1919, Lukács asked, "Who will save us from Western civilization?" These perceived reasons behind the failure of communism throughout Europe led, in 1923, to a group of Jewish Marxists establishing a think tank in Frankfurt as the Institute for Social Research, which later became known simply as the Frankfurt School. It was initially led by a Jew, Felix Weyl, a political scientist with a passion for Marxism. Weyl had studied at the university, writing a dissertation socialising the economy. His father, a wealthy Jewish merchant, set up a substantial endowment for the Institute. One of the major purposes of the Institute was to study and eventually explain the dynamics of social change. This school of transformational Jewish Marxist thought was to be the birthplace of cultural Marxism. The aim was to transform Marxism from economic terms into cultural terms. To do this required a rejection and re-evaluation of certain elements of Marxist theory that the proletariat outside of Russia had rejected. They needed a new revolutionary to advance their revolution. Who then if not the working class? Herbert Marcuse, another prominent Jewish member of the Frankfurt School, answered this question in the 1950s. A coalition of non-white, non-Westerners, students, feminist women and homosexuals would now form the basis of the new cultural revolution. Through their empowerment in society and through a systematic brainwash process, they would now be the tools through which a traditional culture of the West could be subverted and destroyed, bringing about the communist revolution they so desired. Not via violent revolution, but via fifth column of subversion. Max Horkheimer, another Jewish member of the Frankfurt School, explained this as follows. The revolution won't happen with guns. Rather, it will happen incrementally, year by year, generation by generation. We will gradually infiltrate their education institutions and their political offices, transforming them slowly into Marxist entities as we move towards universal egalitarianism. The Treaty of Versailles, which was forced upon Germany after the Great War, was designed to totally humiliate and weaken the country. The conditions in post-World War I Germany were so dire and desperate that the German people had sunk into new depths of poverty. Unemployment was running at almost 7 million and inflation was out of control. Germany was on the verge of complete ruin. During the 1930s, the political ideology grew out of the orchestrated ruins of post-World War I Germany that was vehemently opposed to Jewish Marxism. Germany was desperate for an answer to their problems, and they found it in an emerging ideology known as National Socialism. The rise of National Socialism meant that the Jewish Marxists of the Frankfurt School, plotting the downfall of the West and which had played a pivotal role in the downfall of Germany, were basically run out of town. This did not mean an end to the Frankfurt School. They simply moved to America. The move was to spell disaster for the USA, as the move shifted the attention from Western culture in Europe to Western culture in America. They returned to Frankfurt in the 1950s to continue their efforts to debase European nations and culture, and this began in earnest after World War II. The new revolution needed more than mere words. It needed a new strategy. Antonio Gramsci, an Italian communist, wrote in his prison notebooks that for in order for communism to be completed in Europe, it must go through a long march through the institutions. The idea of a long march through Western institutions was to be a gradual erosion of morality and to implement criticism of the culture at the core of the education system via a strategy known as critical theory. In other words, gain control of the institutions that had influence over the people and use them to turn the people against themselves and their culture. Gramsci is noted for his theory that cultural hegemony is the means to class dominance. In his view, a new communist man had to be created through a changed culture before any political revolution was possible. This led to the focus on efforts of intellectuals in the fields of education and media. George Lucas believed that for the new Marxist culture to emerge, the existing culture must be destroyed. He said, "I saw revolutionary destruction of society as the one and only solution to the cultural contradictions of the epoch. Such a worldwide overturning of values cannot take place without the annihilation of the old values and the creation of the new ones by the revolutionaries." The target of the criticism was the culture. Critical theory was essentially destructive criticism of the main elements of Western culture, being the Marxist cultural alternative that arose out of critical theory, whilst false and severely damaging, has become the norm in nearly all universities and schools today. They repeat the brainwashing process, free of any opposition, turning generation after generation into cultural Marxist zombies who parrot the mantra.
Stand up, fight back! Stand up, fight back! Stand up, fight back!
Critical theory, as its name implies, criticizes. What deconstruction does to literature, critical theory does to societies. In today's society, many people call this dialect woke or politically correct. I can assure you, by doing this, you dilute the real threat and endgame of communism. Critical theory has played a crucial role in the ideological assault on the West. Three of the most vital aspects of Western culture to be undermined, criticised and destroyed were Christianity, the family and nationalism. Nationalism is targeted by the enforced implementation of multiculturalism and via state-created race laws to stifle and shut down nationalist opposition. Multiculturalism is also used to dilute the indigenous ethnic makeup of Europe and to remove any sense of identity to one's nation. Both Christianity and the family have suffered a relentless attack also. Before the founding of the Institute for Social Research and before Gramsci's prison notebooks, George Lucas had already set in motion a strategy which sought to demoralise the morality of Hungary during the Bella Kun regime, reasoning that if Christian sexual ethics could be undermined among children, well then both the hated patriarchal family and the church could be dealt a crippling blow. Lucas launched a radical sex education program in the schools. Children now as young as 5 were being exposed to shocking sex education material in primary schools, according to research. Sex lectures were organised and literature handed out which graphically instructed youth in free love, promiscuity and sexual intercourse. Simultaneously, this encouraging them to deride and reject Christian moral ethics, monogamy, and parental and church authority. All of this was accompanied by a reign of cultural terror, perpetrated against parents, priests, and dissenters. Those who speak out or criticise the Marxist dialect will now be labelled Nazi, fascist, or far-right by the Marxist communists, who uses tolerant organisations such as anti-fascism or anti-racism, which are all subsidiaries of international terrorist organisation Anti-Fascist Action, that stemmed from the German Communist Party, the KPD, in the 1930s. These communists are supported by all mainstream political parties, mainstream media, NGOs, trade unions, and all local and national community groups. Hungary's youth, having been fed a steady diet of values neutral, which is atheism, and radical sex education, whilst encouraged to rebel against all authority, easily turned them into delinquents ranging from bullies and petty thieves to sex predators, murderers, and sociopaths. Gramsci's prescription and Lukas's plan were the precursor to what cultural Marxism later brought into American schools. This was also the precursor to what the rest of the Western world would suffer as a result of the Frankfurt School. This added strategy of sexual promiscuity was incorporated into the Frankfurt School via Sigmund Freud's psychoanalysis. His crazy work, The Psychosexual Stages of Development, was attractive to the school as it further aided the aim of debasing the foundations of Western society, especially that of the family and the morality that it instilled. According to George Lukács, the demons were back. The evil was being generated in your own mind, and you needed a new priesthood to save you. The crackpot ideas of Freud, added to that of the transformational Marxists, led to the term Freudo-Marxism. Freud's theories inspired future Jewish psychologist Wilhelm Reich, who created and spread the term sexual revolution in 1930. It was to become a feature of the Frankfurt School's subversion of Western society. The sexual revolution was inspired by Freud, and to this day has a devastating impact on traditional morality and the traditional family. Freud's psychological theories were formed by his own dreams and childhood memories. He claimed he remembered hating his father and was convinced he had sexual feelings towards his mother. Freud later wrote, "I found in myself a constant love for my mother and jealousy of my father. I now consider this to be a universal event in childhood." In 2004, Jewish author Nathan Abrams wrote in the Jewish Quarterly that Jews were also at the vanguard of the sexual revolution in the 1960s. Wilhelm Reich, Herbert Marcuse, and Paul Goodman replaced Marx, Trotsky, and Lenin as required revolutionary reading. Everything that has come out of the Frankfurt School has been specifically aimed at destroying our heritage and our people. Our children are being led by the Pied Piper of evil, led to the eternal immersion into a world of mental subversion and destruction. Our culture and our unifying common understanding of what is right and what is wrong is in the hand of communists. Society is sick, poisoned with slow-killing disease that eats away at the immune system of a people and their heritage. Isn't it time you stopped the denial and the apathy? Isn't it time you recognise the truth? After all, it stares you in the face. I stand with Justin Barrett and Clan Éireann because I believe in him, and I believe his heart is pure in the fight for my nation. Regardless of your personal opinions on Justin or Clan Éireann, ridiculing or attacking any nationalist movement only strengthens that of the establishment and dilutes the national idea. If you want change, it's up to you as an individual to come up with the best ways to make that change. But I implore you not to be someone who tries to destroy any movement because of irrational opinions on any one individual. We continue to attack nationalists who are trying to do something instead of calling out the cowards who hide and do nothing. Calling people controlled opposition because someone says something that they don't like. Constant infighting by whispers and rumours is a tactic that strengthens the international establishment and weakens and dilutes the national movement, something we can all fall prey to. But I ask people to ask themselves, before going after any individual or movement, how does this help the nationalist movement? Does it help it or weaken it? Not everyone fully understands the true enemy. Not everyone fully understands the full agenda. So be aware, this doesn't necessarily make them bad people or shills. We all come from different walks of life. We all have difference of opinions. That's okay, because after all, we are all uniquely different. From day one of the pandemic, I want people to trust no one and to question everything. This is still my belief. But I will stand with any movement and by any person that I feel is trying to shape an Ireland best for the Irish people. This is why I stand with Clan Éireann, and I ask those who want to try something different to also join them. This is the war right now that we face as a nation, an identity crisis. Ireland has been going through something of an identity crisis for decades. But it's only really now people are becoming aware of it. This is simply because so much of what has traditionally been known as the Irish identity, traditionally known for centuries, have been quickly eradicated in a short space of time. Religion, family, and a sense of community were all core pillars of the Irish identity that swayed the direction of our wonderful nation. But our desire for our national sovereignty and the protection of our unique identity has been frowned upon in recent years. There seems to be no more Irish pride in our communities, as our expert class have socially conditioned the mass population through the use of psychology and the indoctrination through the public school education system and through our mainstream media and entertainment industry. What exactly is a nation, you may ask? Well, nations are formed because there's a collection of people who share a common culture, history, language, ethnicity, religion, morals and ethics. These people then agree to form a nation because despite the vast array of differences between individuals, they all have enough in common to believe that what they share is a general vision of what's best for their people. A nation dies when its people no longer recognises the importance of family and also forgets the basic principles of their ancestors that who created the nation. What kind of country do we want to be going forward is totally up to the Irish people, not the internationalists. The anti-Irish establishment would like us to believe that this neoliberal progressive future of modern Ireland within a communist dystopian 15-minute smart prison is inevitably written in stone. But it's not. It's written in chalk, and chalk can be erased at any time. I can't tell you what the future of this country is going to be, but it is up to every Irish man to fight for the future they want it to look like. Our Constitution declared the right of the people of Ireland to the ownership of Ireland and to the unfettered control of Irish destinies to be sovereign and indefeasible. The long usurpation of that right by a foreign people and government has not extinguished the right, nor can it ever be extinguished except by the destruction of the Irish people. In every generation, the Irish people have asserted their right to national freedom and sovereignty. 6 times during the past 400 years they have asserted it in arms, standing on the fundamental right and again asserting it in arms. in the face of the world. Ireland is once again under control by an alien government with alien ideologies. Whilst our leaders may look Irish, I can assure you, those that they serve is not the Irish people. However, it is the interests of the EU, the United Nations and the World Economic Forum, and most importantly to the interests of corporations, big business, and most importantly the stakeholders of these corporations. The world is upside down. We were told that socialists were the proletariat, rising up against the rich bourgeoisie capitalists. We were also told that fascism was originally seen as a merger between corporation and state. But why is it then that Irish nationalism, labelled far-right fascists, are all from working class areas, poor to low income folks? Surely they would be the true proletariat. And now we see the so-called Irish socialists, who are made up of upper class NGOs aligned with the establishment's agendas, and all the multi-billion-dollar corporations promoting and endorsing every liberal Marxist demand. You see, neoliberal Marxism have spun the world upside down. Communism sees everything as natural as bad, and everything as unnatural as good. In this upside down world, it's the most corrupt moral individuals are the ones that are rewarded in the system. We reward the pedophiles, we reward the corrupt, we reward the liars, we reward the people with no morals at all. You see, the people promoting the socialist agenda, Agenda 21, are they socialists? Absolutely not. You see, communism is not the creation of the masses to overthrow the banking system. Instead, it is the creation of the banking system to overthrow and enslave the masses. Fascism was created to combat communism. It centers on attacking neoliberal Marxist progressivism and upholding the state through institutions of the church, family and nation. This is the true face of communism. Unfortunately, the people that were led down the path of believing in the philosophy of socialism believe that they are fighting for equality and fairness. The mouse cannot understand why the tempting free cheese is staring at him. The idea of free things, as tempting as it may sound, always has a catch, you see. There is nothing free in life. No, for socialism to work, government must take from one and give to another, ensuring everyone is now reliant on government. The truth is that government cannot give you anything if it does not take from somebody else. It is not the power of the government to make everybody more prosperous. If Ireland is to remain an Irish republic and as a sovereign independent state, we must once again pledge our lives and the lives of our brothers in arms to the cause of its freedom, of its welfare, and of its exaltations among the nations. The Irish Republic shall once again be under the rightful ownership of every Irishman and Irish woman that has many generations of blood within its soil. Éireann go bragh.
I'm married to a brown man from Bolivia. Oh my God, I'm such a homophobe. One of my good friends is a neighbour who identifies as she, her on Facebook, but we talk as man to man. By the trans agenda, because they told us that men can have babies and men can have periods, and it's not true. It's simply not true. XX chromosomes, XY chromosomes, that's biology, that's science. Let us bring back science to the discussion. That's all I want to say. Thank you very much.
I want to tell you, good folk first, that with the dawn of a new decade, I will be setting a new course. The men of money, the capitalists in New York, the Jews, the money power, they run an international system in which the infinite mobility of money, its capacity to create financial chaos and panic, can bring down any government that dares for one moment to oppose it. For generations, the efforts of hard-working men like you have equipped our competitors against us. The cotton mills of India, the cotton mills of Asia, created with British money, but used for the destruction of Lancashire and Yorkshire. The usurers of New York, the sweated labor of the Orient, combining to destroy the iron and steel factories of Warwickshire and Staffordshire. These are policies that could not be pursued by British statesmen unless they were mad or the servants of Jewish finance. They sell to the people false news to raise the interests of the faction and the section above the interests of the nation. The ranks of our heroes of the Great War have been betrayed. Again and again by politicians. So hear my words and pass them on to those with ears to hear. Hear this. Those of you who fought the Jew war for nothing, you brave men, you will join hands.
We will protect ourselves from the foreign invader. We will protect ourselves from the red bombs. But we will also be ready to protect ourselves and defend ourselves with as much violence as is necessary. Make no mistake, Ireland is standing up. We will have, in the next 20 to 30 years, we will either have victory or we will have death. There is no in between. There is no politics about it. There is no percentages up and percentages down, or first preference and second preference voting. It is whether Ireland lives or Ireland dies, or Ireland will have ceased to exist, drowned in the mass of numbers from all over the world. We are here to say this cannot happen. And at the very least, if we're going to go down, we're going to go down fighting.
Of all the money that I had, I spent it in good company, and all the harm I've ever done, alas, it was to none but me. And all I've done for want of wit to memory now I can't recall. So fill to me the parting glass. Good night and joy be to you all. So fill to me the parting glass, and drink a health whate'er befall. Then gently rise and softly call, good night and joy be to you all. Of all the comrades that e'er I had, the sorry for my going away, and all the sweethearts that e'er I had, they wish me one more day to stay. But say gently rise and softly call. Good night and joy be to you all. Fill to me the parting glass and drink a health whate'er befall. Then gently rise and softly call. Good night and joy be to you all. Good night and joy be to you all.
Where's the, oh, Irish brothers and sisters fought and died so Ireland could be free. How do you not see? How do you not see?